The issues affecting you. Revealed, explained, discussed. Now on WGAL 8 in Focus.
Hello, I'm Susan Shapiro. A recent Gallup poll found 79% of Americans disapprove of the way Congress is handling its job, while only 15% approve. Congress's approval ratings have been mostly underwater since 1974. Why is that, and how do lawmakers get things done? Democrat Bob Casey Jr. served in the U.S. Senate from 2007 until 2025, when he lost to Republican Dave McCormick. We'll get his take on the current state in Washington and the upcoming midterm elections as we put a conversation with Senator Bob Casey Jr. in focus. I'm joined now by Senator Bob Casey. Thank you so much for being here.
Susan, great to be with you again. Thank you.
Yeah, it's good to see you after a few months, that's for sure. We talked about the disapproval rating of Congress in this country, which has been very high for many, many years. Why is that?
Well, it has been high for not just years, but even longer if you go back in our history. But some of that is reflective of when people feel like they're struggling and they're trying to work through challenges in their own lives, whether it's in the economy or the cost of food or gas or things like that. And they see Congress having fights, and then things aren't, legislation's not worked out that would provide a remedy or some relief. I think there's an obvious frustration with that, but it's people might think the numbers are worse now than they've ever been, but I'm not sure I have a fix on the exact number, but I think it's reflective of sometimes when people get frustrated the government doesn't deliver enough that improves their lives. So every member of Congress has a shared responsibility to try to get things done.
Yeah, it's hovered anywhere from 79 to 86%, and the approval rate is very low.
Right.
So what do you have to do, or do they have to do to change that?
Well, I think when people see results from either Washington or a state capitol here in Harrisburg, where they see legislation passed or policy changed or moved forward that affects their lives personally, that's usually when they're giving higher ratings than they are now.
I was reading some past articles, and a number of years ago you had stated, I'm here to help drive prices down, and you also talked about the fentanyl crisis at the time.
Right.
I feel like we're talking about the same things now.
Yeah, a lot of the challenges remain. I think the cost numbers have been high for a number of years. They've been exacerbated lately. I think obviously the war with Iran has triggered some of the increase in gasoline, but food prices have been high for a long time. And to a certain extent, at least my view is that the Congress should focus on, if you can't ratchet down a cost, if that's not possible, in some instances it might be, but if that's not possible, then you should pass tax legislation at least that would provide more resources for people. I think one of the best things that Congress did way back in 2021 was to pass a more robust version of the child tax credit. It was passed in March of 21. By July of 21, there was $400 or $500 in the bank accounts of a lot of Americans raising children. That's what the tax credit is for, to help pay for the cost of raising children.
Something concrete there to help people.
And it puts money right in your bank account so you can deal with the high price of food, for example. And a lot of families at that time were using it to pay for food or expenses in their own lives. I remember meeting with some mothers in the Lehigh Valley, 2 moms in particular, and they had maybe 5 kids between them or 6 children, and they were using that child tax credit to purchase food, but they were also using it to pay for school activities for their children, enrolling them in activities in schools that they couldn't afford before. So those kinds of direct and substantial impacts on people's lives. Obviously, I'd love to see some robust tax reform and something close to or analogous to a middle-class tax cut. The top 1% or the top earners in the country, sometimes people that are just making money off of investments, the wealthiest among us, they've been getting tax breaks for 40 years. It's about time, I think, that the middle got a substantial tax cut so they can pay for some of these prices that have been higher.
What about tariffs?
Well, I think there's a way to utilize the tariffs as a tool, but as a kind of a surgical instrument. For example, when I was in the Senate, we had, and this actually went through two administrations, both the first Trump administration and the Biden administration, where tariffs were then used to help our steel industry, where it was targeted on a particular industry that was being undermined, I think illegally, by China and other countries, where we can use tariff power in that way. I think what's happened in the last 18 months is it's been a broad and categorical application of tariffs that I think has been injurious or adverse to the economy that I think we should, I hope the administration would refocus on much more surgical tariffs to help American industries when they're being undercut by China or some other country.
All right, well, stay with us. We'll talk about some of the workings of the Senate when we come back.
This is WGAL 8 in Focus, coverage you can count on.
We continue our conversation with Bob Casey, who served 18 years in the U.S. Senate. That's a long time.
It is a long time.
Yeah, quite a tenure. Some have argued that the Senate, gives smaller states the same kind of power that it gives states like Pennsylvania. What do you think about that?
Well, the framers designed it so that you'd have some balance, that states, each state would have a kind of equal power when it comes to the actions and the determinations made by the Senate. That's our system, and I think we have to deal with it. Now, at times it might frustrate people that if you're in a big state with a much larger population and another state has equal weight, that can be frustrating.
Like Pennsylvania, right? Yeah.
Correct, yeah.
What about the filibuster? Do you think we need to end that?
Well, I was hoping, at least when I was there, I was in favor of some kind of reform where I think there's a way to design a new rule where you could have robust debate, because the filibuster really today isn't really at all senators getting on the floor and talking against legislation or speaking in favor of legislation. That hasn't happened in a long time,
right.
Maybe decades. Today, the filibuster is just the invocation by one side that this particular vote will be 60 votes. Now, you can sidetrack that or get around that by the so-called reconciliation process. But it doesn't, I think the system doesn't make a lot of sense today, where legislation that is supported by 70 or 80% of the country is thwarted because of this rule. So I think there's a way to design a rule that the minority in the Senate, Democrat or Republican, depending on when it is, can still have a long time to make their case against legislation where they want to stop it. But at some point, that long debate, whether if it goes on for weeks of speeches, days or weeks of speeches, at some point when that debate ends, there should be a vote, and it should be 51 votes. So I think there's a way to continue to empower the minority, which is kind of the reason for having 60 votes, that you have consensus in the Senate. But I think often major legislation is thwarted. For example, common sense gun reform, background checks that are supported and have been supported by 80% or more of the American people, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, no matter where people are, they want us to have a robust background check system in place. That's been thwarted because it can get, say, 55 votes or 56 and not 60. That doesn't make sense, I don't think, in our system.
Let's talk about the war in Iran. If you were there, would that be something you would support, and especially this request for billions more dollars for this war?
The problem is that the Congress, both the House and the Senate, never had a debate on this. So we commenced a military action with Israel to attack Iran without any kind of authorization, even without a debate and or authorization. And this isn't the first time this has happened. I think it was adverse to the interests of our country to have it happen this time. But this has been going on for too many years, where the Congress is showing too much deference to the president and the executive branch when it comes to the grave question of war that should be debated.
So would you have voted to limit the president's powers in going to war?
I would have, yes. But even before you get to that limitation of the power, there should be a debate that precedes us. In other words, when you have, we just this week are marking the deaths of up to 18 of our service members. When someone sacrifices for the country, the heroic sacrifice that they've made, that sacrifice should be recognized with a policy that is worthy. And the only way a policy can be worthy of that sacrifice is when it's debated. If it is such a compelling case, put it on the floor of the Senate and the House and debate it, not just for a couple of hours, but for days or even weeks, and then have a vote to authorize the use of military force or not. So it isn't the first time it's happened, but I think that if the objective of this administration, as it has been for many years, to stop Iran from having a nuclear weapon, clearly what's been happening lately isn't working to achieve that objective. And I think there's no question that everyone wants that to be the outcome, but I think we need a different strategy to get to that outcome where they do not have a nuclear weapon.
And just quickly, would you have approved this request for this amount of money that's being requested now?
Oh, the most recent request?
Yeah.
Not without a long debate and hearing the justification for what the money would be used for. You can't just go to the Congress and have one or two hearings and then ask for tens of billions more. And I'm afraid that the numbers we're hearing about the cost of the war so far might be greatly underestimated.
Oh, I was going to say they might be.
Yeah.
Okay, well, stay with us.
Could be tens of billions more.
We'll talk more about some of your former colleagues and who you may or may not stay in touch with.
This is WGAL 8 in Focus, coverage you can count on.
And Bob Casey is here with us talking about a variety of things as he was in the Senate for 18 years. We have some important elections coming up, the midterm elections. Yep. A lot of focus on how the Democrats will do. What's your take at this point?
Well, I think there's no question when it's a midterm of a presidency, either first term or second term, that's always usually an opportunity for the party out of power to have some success and some pickups. I think in the House especially, I think there'll be a number of Democratic wins, some of them here in Pennsylvania, that might be the reason that the House majority changes. There's one here, obviously, for Congress.
Right, in the 10th Congressional District and one in Scranton.
Yeah. 8th where I live,
yep.
Yeah. So those will be hotly contested races. But I think in terms of the Democrats, in terms of the focus or the messaging, I'm not sure it matters where you are, what region of the state or the country. I think the number one issue that most people are concerned about are costs. I've heard it expressed GGHH, groceries, gas, housing, healthcare. Probably an easy way to remember it. But I think on all those fronts, there is, people feel the weight of those costs, and in some cases have felt them for years, and they want an answer to that. That's why I think focusing on a middle-class tax cut, a robust child tax credit, to literally put dollars in the pockets of families that are struggling and make the wealthy pay for it. And that should be, I think that should be, there's no reason why the wealthy should be getting a tax cut that they got last year that costs hundreds of billions of dollars. By one estimate, as much as $1 trillion over 10 years. That doesn't make any sense. That's not going to help the country grow.
There's been a lot of talk about your former colleague, John Fetterman, possibly leaving the Democratic Party. What do you think the Democrats need to do to keep him, or do you think they should?
Well, I won't give them advice, or him advice. But when you're in the Senate, sometimes there are issues where there's not total agreement within a party, and I think that's natural. But I'll leave the political scientists to figure all that out.
He's talked a lot about Israel and support for Israel, and that's why he says he could possibly leave the Democratic Party if the Democrats don't fully support Israel.
Well, and I don't have any insight into his thinking on how he's approaching that, but I think I think it's going to be critically important for Democrats across the board to focus on those cost issues, and also to be very clear about some of these foreign policy issues when it comes to the war with Iran and bringing that to a conclusion in a manner that will both protect our national security as well as to protect Israel's security. And I think we can achieve that, but it's going to require some bipartisan work that we haven't seen of late.
Yeah, not so. We've seen a couple of the death of Lindsey Graham was certainly very sudden, and now we have Mitch McConnell, who's been out of work for quite some time. What do you think of that?
Well, there are times when a member or more than one member is out. That's not unusual, and I sure hope Mitch McConnell can recover and complete the term that he's in.
Do you think he should have been more transparent about what was going on?
Well, look, I had just tell you what I did. I had in early 2023, February of 2023, had prostate cancer surgery, and I thought it was incumbent upon me to tell people I was going to have that surgery and then I'd be out for a little while. Now, fortunately, it was only about 13 days. I think I know exactly how long. But
and how are you doing now?
Doing well, and I was really fortunate that there was a surgical intervention that could help me. But I think you have to be very direct with people about something as important as that, because when you're missing votes, people have to know why, and I think that's important to have that kind of transparency.
All right, well, stay with us. We'll talk more about what you're doing now and how it's going for you.
This is WGAL 8 in Focus, coverage you can count on.
Senator Bob Casey is here talking about his time in the U.S. Senate. Just quickly, you've had some time to reflect. What do you think happened in your race? Why did you lose?
Oh, I'm not sure there's one reason. There's a whole range of reasons. But I was really blessed to have had 18 years in the Senate and then 10 years before that in state government, both as Auditor General and State Treasurer. So to have 28 consecutive years in a statewide office was a real privilege. So I've been blessed.
Yeah, well, good. And now you're working in corporate law. You're with Dilworth Paxson in Philadelphia and also with the University of Scranton. So what is that transition like for you?
Well, it's a different life. You don't have to travel to Washington every week, obviously, and that's a big change. But most of my week is doing work for the Dilworth Paxson law firm based in Philadelphia, but I tend to travel around the state for them and work on generating some business for them. And then one day a week, and especially even more so during the school year, I'm at the University of Scranton as a fellow in public service, meaning that I talk to students either in small groups or sometimes one-on-one to encourage them to at least consider public service, even if they're not thinking along those lines, if they're a business major or even in the sciences. Or I mentioned my daughter who was in pre-med and then became a doctor. You have, I think, an opportunity at some point in your life to do public service of one kind or another. I always tell the business majors, even if you run a big company for the rest of your life, you can consider doing some public service. In fact, one of the founder of our firm, Richardson Dilworth, was the mayor of Philadelphia. And Dilworth always wanted to, and always preached the idea of not just reform and ethical public service, which is what I try to talk about a lot, but also that you can give back even as you're working in a business or leaving a business and doing some public service. So we're hoping the next generation will continue to embrace public service and do it ethically and competently.
But are you not now working for that big corporation that maybe you were fighting against in all your years in the Senate?
Well, it certainly is a law firm, and it has corporate clients, but it has all kinds of clients across the board. And what I was always trying to focus on when it came to corporations is that they paid their fair share of taxes, and that the wealthy who were sometimes running those companies, and many of whom have made a lot of money through the tax code often because of generous tax policy for 40 years, that they start to give back to the country. And I think we got some work to do on that.
The Senate is a very elite group, a small number. What do you miss about it?
Well, you get to know people in a very direct way because it is a small governmental organization in that sense, 100 people. And you get to know their staffs. Increasingly, though, you don't get to know them as well as you used to, because people are always scattering on Thursdays to be back in their home state. House members go back to their district. People are raising money. Unfortunately, that's a lot of the time they spend. And sometimes I think the personal interaction between and among senators isn't as robust as it used to be, where people got to know their families better and they worked better together. I'm not sure there's a solution to that necessarily, but I think changing the dynamics of campaigns where you don't have to spend as much money raising money would help the institution of the Senate function better, but that's a tall order of
Yeah,
weight.
no, I mean, people are spending tens of millions of dollars on campaigns.
Yep, and I think the biggest drawback of that is there's certainly the potential for corruption, but I think it really is about time. When you're spending that much time raising money, you're not spending as much time learning or talking to a constituent or reading or staying longer at a hearing or whatever else your duties in the Senate or House would encompass. And the time you're spending fundraising, I think puts other things kind of in deficit.
Especially in the House. As soon as they get there, I feel like they're
Yeah,
running again.
Those 2-year terms come up fast, yeah.
Well, Senator, thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
Well, Susan, great to be with you, and I'm lucky to have had the opportunity to talk to you all these years.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for joining us for WGAL 8 in Focus. For all of us at WGAL, I'm Susan Shapiro. And join us again next Sunday morning at 11 o'clock for WGAL 8 in Focus, right after NBC's Meet the Press. And you can watch each episode of In Focus, plus WGAL's latest newscasts, original programming, and more. Just download the Very Local app and stream for free on Roku and Amazon Fire TV.